Hello, and thank you for watching this presentation. My name is Mark Radcliffe. I'm an educational programs consultant with Edmentum, and today we're going to talk about Ohio end-of-course exam intervention. And the specifics of this are related to some recent changes in the legislation within Ohio that is setting up certain segments of students to not be able to take alternative graduation pathways. So within Ohio, as you know, I'm sure as an Ohio educator, there are several ways that students can graduate. One of them being getting enough points on their end of course exams, in addition to industry standard assessments. And until recently, there was also alternative graduation pathways for certain students who could not fit into that criteria. And as that's been changed, we've seen a lot of districts reaching out to us for help in how to make sure they have students getting as many points as possible on these end of course assessments. So when we look at EOC, preparation, remediation, intervention, any scenario where we're looking to get a student as many points as possible, we're really looking at graduation. We want students to graduate on time by successfully earning enough points on those end of course exams. And we really have three components to supporting students in their pathway to getting as many points as possible. The first is something that schools do every day. We provide students with appropriate high quality curriculum and instruction that's aligned to those the content areas and the topics that are assessed on those exams. Now you're doing that all the time. You do that by choosing quality core curriculum, by hiring talented teachers, and you support and serve a good portion of your population with that. And of course, as we know, there are students that does not support. For whatever reason, they're not able to go through your traditional instructional process and gain enough knowledge of the content or enough comfort level with the exam to pass it at a level where they'll get enough points to graduate. And that's really the segment of students that I want to talk about here in this presentation. So we're really looking here about intervention, where a student is not getting enough points on those exams using traditional means. And that's really the second two items here. So what we're going to do with those students is, first of all, diagnose where they need support. Where are they weak? What academic areas are they struggling in? And once we've identified that, providing them with flexible access to interventions to support them. So as a simple example, if we have a student that has taken an EOC and essentially failed it, not got enough points to be proficient, how do we support that student if they are currently not in the class that EOC is aligned to? How do we provide them with curriculum, instruction, and support that fits into their schedule? The other end of the spectrum would be a student that hasn't yet taken the exam, and we want to get some sort of idea of how we think they'll do on the exam and whether we need to support them. Maybe they're struggling in their current class, they're starting to fall behind, and we want to provide them some support. And I'm sure you can think of many other examples as well, but that's essentially the subset of students that we're going to talk about. So at Edmentum, we have many different programs in our toolbox that we can reach for, and I'm going to focus on one of them today, but I want to just give you a quick view of all the different tools that I can reach for on a day-to-day basis where I support these programs. And this isn't designed to overwhelm or anything like that. I'm not going to go through everyone individually. I just wanted to point out to you what we can reach for. So as a consultant at Edmentum, I talk to schools, I determine what kind of problems they're trying to solve or what goals they're trying to get to, and then I reach into my toolbox to support those. And within the program set at Edmentum, there are really three tools that have Ohio EOC aligned content in them. Courseware over on the left is our digital curriculum platform, our online course platform. Here we have full courses that are specifically designed to be used as a core curriculum, first-time instruction for those EOC exams. So that is more in that mode of supporting the larger population, first-time instruction, getting them ready and teaching those concepts, but in an online environment or in a blended learning environment, let's say. So it's more kind of course of study. The other one way over on the right is Study Island. Study Island is a practice and assessment tool. This is really great for getting a magnifying glass on specific standards that you want to see if students are prepped for, and also prepping them for the exam itself, the types of questions they're going to see on the exam, getting them lots of practice on the different styles of questions, as well as kind of, like I say, pinpointing that particular standard. But we're going to focus here in the middle on assessments. The reason I want to focus on assessments is that's where I have a tool that has diagnostic information, so I can have students take a diagnostic to determine areas that they need support with, but also it's coupled with curriculum. So a student's going to take a diagnostic, it's going to determine where their areas of support are, and then it's going to reach into our curriculum bank and automatically assign them digital lessons, practice, and quizzes to strengthen those areas of need that they have. So we have 3 tools, but I'm going to focus on this one today predominantly because I'm talking about intervention. So the actual specific tool we're going to look at is what's called a test pack. Now that's just Edmentum's naming structure, but the best way to think of a test pack is that it is an individualized learning tool. So what a test pack will do is identify where students have areas of need or weakness on a particular high stakes assessment. So in this case, we could be talking EOCs, we could also be talking ACT. So the student will take an assessment which is specifically designed to assess the skills on that particular high stakes exam that we're determining. But what makes it a true personalized learning tool is that then it will pull curriculum, online curriculum, and assign it to the student automatically to strengthen those areas. So these are high quality assessments that can be used to prep for high stakes exams and provide personalized learning as well. When we look specifically at Ohio, there are several test packs that support implementations that we do within Ohio schools. So these are just the general list. I put the EOCs there on the left and the top right, but then also just wanted to point out that we do have test packs for ACT, SAT. There's many different subjects or high stakes exam alignments that we have for test packs. So even beyond this, we have things like GED and HiSET and so forth, and many different types of exams that you can use to provide that personalized learning path. So the process that I work through with schools is that, first of all, I talk to a school and do some planning with them, and that's where I come in. I'm a consultant with Edmentum. I'm part of our professional services team, so I work with schools to determine what's the best way to reach their goals and how we're going to implement that. Those goals are sometimes simple, sometimes complex. In this case, we'll just make a simple example of, let's say we have a school that has a certain segment of students that have failed their EOCs. They are not in a mainstream class for those EOCs right now, so we need to provide them with some sort of flexible intervention to support them for a retake, just as one example. The first thing I'll do in that scenario is triage those students. What points do each student currently have on those EOCs? How many EOCs did they fail? What distance do they need to move? What distance do those students need to move, to be successful? Triage those students out and determine what kind of intensive level of support do we need for each student. And we're going to administer the diagnostic. We'll take a look at that here in just a moment. That will assign the learning path, and then we're going to monitor and manage the student's progress through that learning path. This piece at the end here is really where you, the school, come into play. You need to determine a support system for that student. And depending on how much intervention that student needs, depends on what that support structure looks like. So if a student that's failed a lot of items plus has additional needs beyond academic needs, maybe they have a bad home situation, or maybe they struggle getting to school, or struggle being motivated, that student is going to need more hands-on support from a human being than a student that has, say, they had a bad day taking the test. They're essentially a good test taker. They just need to brush up on some skills, and they're also a very good independent learner. That student wouldn't need as much hands-on. So these are just examples, but they go into the whole planning process. So let's take a few minutes to actually look at the tool that we would use itself, that test pack tool. So what I'm looking at right now is the actual assessments platform within Edmentum's program set. You can see it says Edmentum Assessments here at the top. I'm just going to quickly jump to the assessments catalog so we can just take a look at those specific assessments. I'm going to scroll through here. You can see there's many different types of assessments. So I'm just finding my way to Ohio EOCs. And I can see all of the EOCs here. Let's look at, say, algebra, since that's a very common area of struggle for schools. If I open up the algebra test pack, you can see there are 4 assessments in there. I'm just going to open up assessment 1. I'm just going to go to view test here. There's 4 assessments to give you some flavor. That will give, it's 4 tests that have different questions on them, but assess on the same topics. One of the secondary reasons we have multiple tests beyond just this idea of flavor is that we do have schools that use these test packs for a benchmarking or formative assessment setup. So give students the test at the beginning of the year as a baseline, then maybe in the winter, December, January, somewhere like that, to show kind of growth towards how students are doing on those particular standard sets. But regardless, you're going to have the student take a test. Now I want to point out a couple of things. First of all, this test is 57 questions, right? It's a EOC algebra assessment, so it's going to be big. Now I'm going to talk about ways that you can adjust that here in a couple of minutes. But on the positive side, this is a full-fledged assessment. It's designed to really give you good detail on what the student does and does not know. I'm just going to spin through the questions for a couple of seconds just so you can see the different question types. The idea of our question types is that they're designed to mirror the types of questions and also the approximate balance of the number of questions on these exams. So as I'm flipping through here, you're seeing different question types. Multiple choice, so they're a drag and drop. Here's another drag and drop style question. Here's a multiple fill in the blanks, multi-part answer question. And the point here is that there's a lot of different types of questions, including both your standard multiple choice as well as your technology enhanced question. So it is going to prep the students, not just on content, but also on the types of questions. So you could use this as a practice exam if you wanted to as well. You can even, if you want, print them out and have a student do it on paper as a practice as well. You'll also find open-ended questions, constructed response style questions on these tests as well. Now, the student takes this assessment. In a perfect world, they take the whole assessment. It's going to determine what they do and do not know, and it's going to build a learning path based upon that. You can choose whether you want to include grading of these open-ended questions in that learning path decision. So the teacher is going to grade this. It's going to come with a rubric. The teacher will get an alert when a student has completed one of these open-ended questions, and they can grade it. You can choose, do you want that teacher grading to be included in the learning path determination or not? And the reason for that is really just time versus detail. If you want a student to complete the assessment and then immediately get a learning path and start working on it, you can have these open-ended questions not count to that decision. If you want to give a little bit of human control, but also have the student wait, maybe 24, 48 hours for the teacher to grade the question, then you can allow these to be included in the learning path description. Now, when we think about the length of the test, I can also create what's called a custom version of the test, which is going to allow me to choose just particular areas of that assessment to be delivered to the student. And apologies there, I accidentally logged myself off, so I'm just going to jump right back in here. But what that custom version does is it allows you to say, okay, I don't want to give a student a 57 question test. This particular student is not in a scenario where they can do that. And these tests can be done over multiple sittings. They don't have to be done right at one time. But what this allows me to do is say, hey, just assess them on, say, numbers and quantity and algebra for right now. Functions and statistics and probability are a little higher up the chain. So I'll come back and I'll look at those later. This will generate me a smaller test. This particular test, has got 4 different domain areas on it. If it was roughly a 60-question test, so if I pick 2 of those domains, it will give me roughly a 30-question test, just as a kind of example. Now, when the students complete those assessments, you will be given data on how they did on that assessment, how they scored, where they struggled and where they didn't. This is the interface for that, so I can see here which students have completed the exams. Let's take a look at Carmen here and see how she did on this particular assessment. So I can see in the categories of how she did, but also just straight points and styles of questions. So, for example, she got 27% of the multiple choice questions correct, whereas got 100% of the constructed response questions correct. So I can see in terms of question type how she did. I can also look on a domain by domain basis of how this student did. So how they did in algebra versus functions versus numbers and quantity. I can also go down to the actual assessment itself and look at every single question that they answered, whether they got it right or wrong, and how they answered it. So there's a lot of detail for your educators, and this is particularly important for those high-touch intervention students, where you want to pour through their results, put them in a setting where they get directed face-to-face instruction, tutoring, or maybe a special education resource room, in addition to this learning path that they're going to be doing. Now, you get the data for every student. It depends on how much detail you want to go into. But that next step is that prescription. If I come up here to prescription details, it's going to show me, based on those areas of struggle that the student had, it's going to automatically assign them content to support them in those areas. This content comes from our content library. It's all aligned to state standards. High quality, engaging content that also has a series of support structures in it too. You can probably hear my speaker in the background reading aloud. So everything is read aloud. In addition to that, there's various supporting tools such as dictionaries, additional read aloud tools such as click to speak. In the case of click to speak, if I have here we go, several, say, paragraphs of content on the screen. I can select a particular word and have that read aloud to me, as opposed to the entire page read aloud. There's also a translation tool with a series of languages. And then, instructional academic style supports like calculators, graphing tools, highlighters, things like that. And the instructional content kind of generally falls into 3 camps: tutorials, application, and mastery tests. This is essentially lesson, direct instruction, practice, and then a quiz to assess the student's mastery of that. And no matter which subject I choose, if I were to say, I'm in algebra right here, say I jump over to physical science, I'm going to see the same kind of idea. So here's Carmen. She's also working on physical science. You can see she's 8% done with her prescription. If I go in and look at the details of her progress, so I'm going to go to her prescription details, I can see how she's doing on her work in here. She's mastered 1 topic so far: stars, galaxies, and the universe. And actually, she's also mastered understanding matter. Now, as I look at this is a really detailed progress monitoring component that tells me exactly what the students worked on, how much time they've spent in it, what their mastery level is, what they looked at and what they didn't. And this is a core piece for your supporting staff as well, to say, what kind of progress is a student making, what topics are they struggling on as they work, and how can I support those students? Now, all of this data can also be bubbled up to the top if you want to see general information on how your students are doing. You can run various types of reports. Probably the most useful one for this scenario is what's called the Strengths and Needs report. This will show you per test how students are doing on those various domain areas, and even group your students up. So you can say, okay, I've got these, say, 20 students who are in, a 1 or a 2 point area on just geometry, and then I can group those students together physically and have them work together in my supporting environment as well. So coupling all these tools along with a face-to-face support, I generally recommend including academic mentors, or giving teachers some time, maybe in an after-school program or during school, to support these students, to bring them together, do face-to-face supports, tutoring, but using that data as they progress in their learning paths to support that student as they go. So just to kind of recap the process here, we're going to run a diagnostic on those students that we've triaged needing help and support. That's going to automatically build that learning path. And from there, we are going to progress monitor that learning path and support those students as they go. So give you the highest potential to support those students that need that intervention and make sure that they do graduate on time and that they don't fall behind as well. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. We'd be happy to help you out. We work with a lot of Ohio schools dealing with this particular scenario. But thanks for your time today, and we'll see you soon.